Hi, I'm Matt Cooksey. I'm going to show you how to install the Quatreau SmartTap with integrated drip tray. These systems fit inside a standard cabinet. Make sure you've read and understood the pre-installation checklist and have brought along the correct tools to complete the job. Let's get this install done. So once you've decided where you want to put your Quatreau SmartTap drip tray, print off the template on the Quatreau website. And this is a really good time to just make sure that everything is square so that you know the holes are going to be drilled in the right place. Do this by going on the front edge of the template and just measure out to the edge of the counter. Go to the other edge and just measure out. Make sure they're the same. While you've got this held down with your ruler, making sure it's nice and flat. And then just with a sharp point, you can mark out the center holes. Just mark out the center holes of the 4 holes that you have to drill. Try and take a bit of time with this. Just make sure you're getting those center holes. Now you know where you can start drilling for your 150mm hole and your 4 holes at 31mm. So now we can take off the tape. And we've now got the holes where we can start drilling through our work surface. We now need to apply a small bead of silicone around the complete outside edge of your Quatreau SmartTap drip tray. Don't go too close to the edge because when it tightens down, it will come out the edges. And this is only a water seal. This isn't to stick it down to the counter, but just go all the way around that outside edge. We're now going to install the drip tray of the Quatreau SmartTap. After you've put the bead of silicone around the drip tray, just be careful so you don't get silicone everywhere. Just make sure you put the correct wires through the correct holes. Your boiling wire goes through the top hole, your chilled wire goes through the middle hole, and your sparkling wire goes through the bottom hole. Just make sure that corresponds with all the icons on the front of the drip tray: boiling, chilled, sparkling. We then install the spout retainer. There is a locating lug on the spout retainer. This locates in the keyway just on the drip tray. Guide the spout retainer in, you'll feel it lock into place. Just be careful not to scratch the top. And if you put your hand underneath, you could just get the brass nut that comes with the kit. Tighten that up, hand tight. Just to make sure everything's lined up. And then if you get your adjustable spanner, just tighten the nut up, last bit. You don't need to over tighten it at all. You just tighten it up. We'll then install the spout. If you put the two plastic pipes down through the spout retainer, slide the spout into place. That locks into place. That can't go any further down. This is a good time to make sure that the spout is actually lined up with the center of the drip tray. If you look straight down, you should be able to see that that's lined up. And if you use a 2mm Allen key and just tighten up the two grub screws that are on the side of the spout retainer, these lock the spout into place. The SmartTap, the spout, you shouldn't be able to move because it's not over a sink, it's just over a drip tray. So that should now be nice and solid. At this point, we need to cut out the essential ventilation for the chiller. These are marked out 35mm in from the front of the cabinet, 235mm wide, and 32mm in from the left-hand side of the cabinet. So option one of the chiller vent kit, you need the skirt that sits underneath the chiller, and you need the extension for the vent on the front. It simply connects together. You can see there's screw holes there that line up with screw holes in the skirt, and you get the screws provided. So that's your extended vent kit, and as you can see, there's a lip on the front that would sit on the base of your cupboard at the very front, covering the slot that we cut out earlier on. The next stage of the ventilation skirt, you have to unscrew the two screws from the chiller chassis. The back plate then locates using the existing screw holes in the chiller chassis. The chiller then sits on top of the skirt, and the plate you've just installed covers the vent at the back, so the chiller will now vent correctly. If it's not fitted correctly, you may have issues with the chiller venting and working properly. This is option one of the chiller vent kit. As you can see, the extended vent covers the hole you cut in the bottom of the cupboard earlier. That fits over there with a lip on the front that stops it moving back. Air can then get drawn in from underneath the vent into the chiller and exhausts out the back. The only time you can't use this kit is if you have a kick panel that is actually flush with the base of the cupboard, or if you have a cupboard door that goes all the way to the floor, then you need to use option two of your chiller vent kit. This is option two for the essential ventilation for the chillers. It needs to be 232mm from the front of the cupboard, and it's 210mm wide. It's the section that is shadowed out in this picture now, and it has to be 50mm in from the left-hand side of the cupboard. This is the first part of your trunking for the ventilation for your chiller. This trunking then slots inside the hole in the kitchen cupboard. And if you see, there's two locating pins there and there. Your second bit of trunking then connects to the front of that, locking into those locating pins. The front of this trunking will then match up to the hole you've cut in the kick panel. Now that the hole has been cut, we can install the first part of the trunking for the ventilation for your chiller, making sure that the hole in the trunking points towards the front of the cabinet. That slots in. Should be nice and tight. And then the second part of the trunking clips into the front. The Quatreau chiller ventilation skirt comes in kit form in the box. It just needs to be clipped together so the end cap goes over the skirt. You've then got 4 screws to put in, 2 on either side, that'll make the skirt. The next stage of the ventilation skirt, you have to unscrew the 2 screws from the chiller chassis. The back plate then locates using the existing screw holes in the chiller chassis. The chiller then sits on top of the skirt, and the plate you've just installed covers the vent at the back, so the chiller will now vent correctly. If it's not fitted correctly, you may have issues with the chiller venting and working properly. I'm now going to show you how to install the drain off kit so we can connect the AA air gap for the Venturi T. When you open the bag for the kit, you'll find these 2 parts here. They're a saddle clamp that fit over the 40mm waste pipe. Make sure in this side of the saddle clamp, you put the O-ring. Just sits inside that recess there. And then if you put that over the top of your waste pipe, and then the other part of the saddle clamp underneath, you then have 4 retaining bolts that just screw into the captive nuts. If you just start those all finger tight, and then using flat blade screwdriver, just go around. If you do them nice and evenly as you go, and make sure that the saddle clamp is pulled down evenly, try not to screw one down all the way tight until everything has started. And once you've got it going, so if you just work around them evenly, just to make sure they're all pulling down nice and evenly, just to make sure that seal is making a really nice tight fit onto the plastic pipe. So make sure they're all nice and tight. And then in the kit, you'll see this little device. Just be careful when you take the cap off, because there's a sharp blade inside there. This has got a screw thread on this part. This fits inside the saddle clamp that's got a screw thread that matches the cutting device. If you just start that with your fingers, you then get a little bar that slides through. And then the blade will be cutting through your white drain pipe. It can be quite tight, but it's not too bad. So just keep going. And then once it cuts through, you'll hear a little pop, and it'll be a lot easier to turn on the thread. Keep screwing a little bit longer just to make sure that the little hole is cut through, and then back that off. And make sure you replace the cap on that little blade, just for a bit of safety. You'll then have your little one-way valve. This is obviously to stop any water, if your drain ever gets blocked, coming back up the pipe. Also helps with odours. Screw that on, just nip that on hand tight. And then if you bring your AA air gap on, that then screws into that as well. And then tighten it down. That's nice and tight. If you do need to fit the air gap and the drain off to a vertical pipe, all you need to do in the kit is this little elbow, and that just screws on there, and then the one-way valve and the air gap screws in on the top. The Venturi T will connect to the top of the air gap, making sure that this T is actually going down to the air gap. When connecting your silicone pipework from your water heater control unit up to your Quatreau SmartTap, make sure that the silicone pipework with the Venturi T connects to the port on the manifold with the red band. and the silicone pipework without a Venturi T goes on the blue pipework. On the other end of the silicone pipework up to the tap, it doesn't matter which of the two plastic pipes coming out the bottom of the tap that they connect to. So when you arrive on site, hopefully this should already be waiting for you. You should have a mains cold water feed in that's isolated, two separate power sources, and a waste upstand for the drip tray. As part of the install kit, you'll have 3/4 to quarter speed fitting. That just screws on your mains water inlet. Screw it down nice and tight. There's a rubber seal in there, so you know it's going to make a nice watertight seal. Don't over tighten it, you don't need any pliers, just do it by hand. And if we cut a length of blue pipe, and if we just keep the blue pipe out of the way, just so it doesn't get snagged on anything, make sure you push it into that fitting nice and tight, and then lift it up so that the collar comes up. You know that it's locked into place. And if we use one of the red 1/4 inch locking clips, that then clips in place. You know that blue pipe's not going anywhere. I'm now going to install the silicone pipe for the waste on the drip tray. This piece of pipe is part of the install kit. You just make sure you push this all the way home. The next step is to connect the silicone pipe from the drip tray into your waste upstand. Cut the pipe to the length you need. Just slide the pipe in to make sure it's nice and secure and hasn't got any kinks. I'm now going to install the silicone hose with the Venturi T to the pipework from the tap. The silicone hose just slides up the plastic pipe from the tap, and then if you slide up your pre-installed spring clip, just so it's nice and tight on there. It doesn't matter which way round these go. And then slide up the second pipe, push it up as far as you can do, and then once again, slide up your pre-installed spring clip, so you know that that's a really nice tight connection. I'm now going to install the wiring for the buttons. The cables are labelled, so make sure you connect the boiling labelled wire to the boiling icon button, and connect your chilled labelled wire to your chilled icon button, and your sparkling labelled wire to your sparkling icon button. I'm now going to install the Quatreau SmartTap. Just be careful sliding the unit in, that you don't damage any of the wires or pipes you've installed, and that you don't damage the base of the cupboard. Then connect up the mains power cable and connect the comms cable from the buttons to the comms port on the back of the unit. We're then going to connect the mains cold water feed in to the right hand side of the Quatreau SmartTap. Just cut the blue pipe to length. Insert into the push fitting and make sure that the collar is locked by pulling the pipe back. We're then going to cut into the pipe again and install the inline filter to protect the system. We then cut the pipe again and just install an isolation valve switched off, just so we can control the water going in and out of the system. Making sure once again that all those blue pipes into the push fittings are nice and tight and the collars are locked into place. We're now going to connect the silicone hose from the water heater control unit up to the two pipes coming out the bottom of the tap. We'll start off with the silicone hose with the Venturi T. Make sure you're connecting the hose with the straight line down to the water heater control unit. Start off by pushing the silicone hose onto the plastic pipe in the bottom of the tap. Push that up as far as you can go. It is quite tight. And then secure that with your spring clip. Make sure that the T side of the silicone hose goes off to your AA air gap. We'll deal with that a little later on. And then make sure you get the measurement right from the silicone pipe up to the tap. That doesn't, make sure you don't have any kinks or twists in the pipe. So just measure that roughly with your fingers and then cut the pipe accordingly. Make sure you have your spring clip already on the pipe and then slide the silicone pipe over the port on the manifold. These are labelled up with a red and a blue heat shrink. So we're fitting the boiling side, which I have the red on the heat shrink. Make sure we secure that into place with your spring clip. That's your silicone pipework on your boiling side of your water heater control unit. We're now going to insert the straight piece of silicone pipe with no T onto the chilled and sparkling side of your water heater control unit. So once again, we just slide that silicone pipe up the plastic pipe in the bottom of the tap. As I say, it's quite tight to do, but just make sure you can push it up as far as you can get it. Slide your spring clip on. Secure it in place. Once again, just measure with your fingers on the silicone pipe to make sure you haven't got any kinks or twists in that pipe, and then cut. Insert the silicone pipe all the way down and attach with your spring clip. That's the silicone pipework for your water heater control unit up to your tap, and we're going to connect the T for the Venturi T silicone pipe into the top of the AA air gap. It just locks down, pushes in place, just to make sure that's a nice tight seal on there. So there's no need for a spring clip on the fitting here, just because there's no pressure in this pipework. This is just for the expansion of water when the water heater control system is heating up the water. Now we're going to install the chiller. We will connect the power at this point, but we just need to make sure that the power is isolated at the switch. But we can plug the cable in now to make it easier once it's in the cupboard. We can now go on to connecting the blue pipes from the chiller to the water heater control unit. You'll have a length of blue pipe. Just cut it to the right length so that you don't have too much excess of pipe. Try and keep it as neat and tidy as you possibly can. Once again, making sure that when you push the blue pipe in, that the blue pipes are locked into the push fittings and that the collar comes out when you pull it so that you can see that it's locked. And if you just match up the ports on top of the chiller with the corresponding ports on the side of the water heater control unit. Just making sure, once again, you don't have too much excess blue pipe. Just to try and keep it as neat and tidy as possible. And then once we've connected the last blue pipe, we can then go along, just double check you've pushed all the blue pipe in to the push fittings, make sure they're all nice and tight, and then you can go along and connect all of your red safety clips. They just slide in around the collar, just to make sure that the blue pipe won't come out if they're knocked at any point. This is quite important just to make sure, and this is a really good time just to double check everything as you're going along. We're now going to commission the Quatreau SmartTap system. We need to start off by turning on the water heater control unit. This is with the switch just on the side of the unit. As soon as you've switched it on, you'll notice red LED lights on the front. At this point as well, just make sure that all the buttons are lighting up. Red for your boiling, blue for your chilled and sparkling. What we need to do now is just connect the gas, because we have to commission the chiller side before we do too much else. The gas bottle just screws onto the gas regulator. These regulators are set in the factory, so you don't need to worry about adjusting them. When you screw the bottle on, once it gets to nearly screwed tight, you'll hear a hiss. And keep tightening until the hiss stops. You now know that the gas is connected to the system. We start off the commissioning process with getting gas through the chiller. We press the sparkling icon on the tap, you'll get a burst of gas. That's exactly what we want to hear. So we now know that there's gas inside the chiller. The next thing we need to do is turn your mains water in, switch that on with the isolator, and then we need to cool the chilled water just to make sure we have water going through the chiller. Let's let that flow for a few seconds just to make sure we've got a nice steady flow and there's no air. Now we know we've got water going through the chiller. The next stage is to turn the chiller on. You just need to switch it on. You'll hear the compressor cut in and the fan cut in. And then you'll hear the pump run, which is trying to pump the water into the gas reservoir. This is completely normal. And the pump should just run for about 20 or 30 seconds. Once that's all going, what you need to do is now call for sparkling water. It may burst out just a small amount, so just be aware. You might need to just catch any splashes just in your jug. You've now got a nice flow of sparkling water. It can take a few attempts just to make sure the flow is correct. Once you're happy with the flow, switch off the sparkling water. You will hear the fan for the chiller running. That's going to run until the chiller gets down to the correct temperature. The best way to check your water's sparkling correctly as well is once it's chilled. So now we've commissioned the machine, what we're going to do, we're going to sanitize. We're now going to sanitize the Quatreau SmartTap system. First stage is to isolate the water. We now need to take the pressure off the system. We can do this by pressing the chilled water function. That just takes any pressure out of the system. We now need to remove the stainless steel filter housing. And then using fingertips, unscrew the carbon filter. Just take it steady as well. Just make sure you've got a little cloth or something underneath the filter housing, because you can lose a little bit of water out of there. Once you've taken that, just put your carbon filter somewhere safe, because you're going to need to put that back in. Then if you take your human safe sterilisation fluid and just put the correct amount in. What we're using here, it just says use a capful. So we've put a capful in the filter housing. Just be a bit careful when using this, because it can bleach your clothes. Just screw it up until it's tight. Now we can turn the water back on. So we're just going to call for chilled water to make sure that human safe sterilisation fluid gets pulled through the whole system. That is now sterilising all the pipework, tank in the whole system, including the tap and the tap tip. Once we've run that through for a few seconds, we'll then turn it off. And the best way to check that the sterilisation fluid has gone through, give it a smell. There's a chlorine smell, so you know that that has gone all the way through the system, all the way to the tap tip. We now need to leave that human safe sterilisation fluid in there for 10-15 minutes, just so we know that that whole system is completely sanitised. This is a good time to refit the carbon filter. We make sure we isolate the water first. Press the chilled function just to take any pressure off. We can now remove the stainless steel filter housing. Just be careful because this is going to be full of water. And if we offer up the carbon filter, just screw it on nice and gently using our fingertips. It should screw on nice and easily. You shouldn't need to force it at all. Once it's tight, you don't need to over tighten it. Just use your fingers to tighten it. Then screw on the stainless steel filter housing, making sure you don't over tighten this. You can just do that hand tight, no need for any pliers, and then just give the area a wipe down. Turn the water back on. If you call for chilled water, just to take the air out of the system. So we now know there's a good flow of water coming through. That means your system is now sanitised and commissioned correctly. And the green light on the front of your water heater control unit means that the water inside is up to temperature and your SmartTap is now ready to be used.